wanted to introduce our team, some of which is stuck in traffic. That's not uncommon, but again, I'm the principal in charge. Joining me tonight is Michelle Smith in our Charleston office, and I'll let these wonderful folks introduce themselves as well.
And I'm Jenny Kirk. We're both with Thompson Tire Construction.
So they're an integral part of our team, especially when it comes to the end of the assessment period, when we really look at how much things cost, when the schedule for those costs occur, and how that 5-year plan and then 10-year plan get put together in a very strategic way. Jenny is joining this effort specifically. She has that background as far as construction management goes, and she has been doing a lot of investigating based on our results. So as Dr. Pye said, we will be, this is a 2-part process. You will be seeing us again in August 10th, and at that time we'll be able to share with you the entire numbers of the actual assessment piece, and then tonight is the demographic study. So those two pieces together really help put the school board and the administration in a spot to make good, clear decisions as far as your facilities moving forward. We started by looking at, obviously, all of your schools. There's a lot of them, and they're at different levels of operation. They're at different ages, and they're certainly at different grade levels. So knowing the ins and outs of each one of those programs, both from an educational standpoint, but also from a building science standpoint, was important to our study, and we've been able to really go through, as we said last time, really document all of the pieces of those buildings. I bring that up just because that's a really important starting point for maintenance and facilities for the district. That forms the baseline maintenance plan for not only the next 1 to 2 years, but really the next 5 years as you start to look at that. We all, though, understand what the vision of the school district is and what needs to go forward and what the priorities appear to be. And as we get into that side of it, understanding your vision does make a difference when we start to prioritize those buildings. It's as Mr. Pye said, a very complex look at how we do assessments and how we look at capital improvements overall, but you can see by the arrow we're more than halfway through that assessment piece. Ending that assessment piece and really moving on to what are the options available to you, not from a maintenance standpoint, but from a larger scale, larger capital improvements plan overall. That's that 10-year plan. So tonight, first and foremost, demographics. We were able to, last time we met, share some just overall picture with you as far as demographics goes, but we wanted to go and deep dive a little bit into each one of those demographic zones and talk about some of the results that the demographic study has. First, you can see the map of Dorchester School District 2 on the left-hand side of the screen. Our demographer looks at any number of data points to really assess what that forecast of a 10-year enrollment is going to be. He starts first with your enrollment data, obviously very important, what's been going on over the last 5 years. Looking at the most recent census, which was in this case 2010, there's an update coming soon. Of course that will impact it, but being able to pair that data along with the census data with federal and state information that is more up to date, 2000 to 2017, South Carolina DHEC death and birth rates, looking not only at that hard data, but also some of the regional and local economic data is really important. Bringing all those together is what gives you a forecast, not a projection, but a forecast as far as what demographics are likely to do in the near future. I would say also our demographer did go to the extra step of calling on municipalities, their zoning and planning departments, to understand what planned developments are out there. He also wanted to understand what has been permitted and what is going to be what can be permitted over that next 10-year period as well. So we wanted to make sure that anything that is coming out of this report is related to what the local economy is actually doing in the field as far as home prices and residential market sales goes.
Ben,
Yes,
can I
ma'am.
ask a quick question? I know I asked this, but can you understand me?
Yes, ma'am.
I know I asked this before, because as we go down certain roads, Old Orangeburg and different roads, Central Avenue, we're seeing a lot of homes being built, a lot of apartments, and help me understand that they don't feel like that's going to cause any kind of growth spurt at all?
I would say that, yes, it does cause growth. There's two factors to that.
Okay.
First, there's not all attendance zones are equal. Some attendance zones are growing, some are staying about the same, and some are slightly declining, so pretty stable in that way. So that's one factor. I'd say the second factor is, as the report says, your population in Dorchester for this school district is aging. It's going from that 35 to 40 age population, general median age, to more of the 40 to 45 year level. So when that happens, obviously those elementary students become middle school students, and middles become high. So while you had tremendous growth, I know for the last 20 years, that you've done a really good job of having the right elementary schools in the right place to control at least the elementary school side of that. So overall, you are growing. It's just not at as fast of a rate as it was in the previous 20 years.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. So if we take the total of the demographic report and look at the current year, here you'll see about 26,256. That's as of the beginning of this year. And really look at where it is overall. You'll see it's almost a wash. It's almost completely the same moving forward. But where it gets really interesting overall from a district perspective, if you total up all elementary, total up all middle, total up all high, that really tells you where your focus might need to be over the next several years. As I said, elementary schools, you have the capacity in a lot of ways. Their demographics don't tell you what to do from a building side. You might look at the age of a building. It might be a different qualifier for an elementary school, but from a demographic and enrollment standpoint, you're able to serve the students that you have right now at the elementary school level. And we'll get into more of that as we go along as well. Middle school and high school is where it changes, however. Like I said, at the middle school level, you are seeing a bubble of growth there, a sustained bubble of growth, and at the high school level, certainly a sustained level of growth there. It's not at the high school level, just as a demonstration, it's not a complete new high school. It's not that size of growth, but it is somewhere in between. So you'll see how that might affect a capital improvements plan if you're looking at the long term in that way as well. So diving in, just like I was mentioning, into those individual zones, we were able to gather all the information from the district as far as attendance lines and attendance zones. We paired that with all the data that's in that report. You should have a copy of that report this evening. This is a graphic representation of that. I find these much easier to kind of understand as far as growth goes. But in this one, we looked at elementary schools specifically. You can see the white areas on this map represent kind of neutrality, neither high growth nor low growth, things that are remaining about the same. And you can see across all elementary schools, if you take into account both their permanent facility and their portables, which is an important point, they are all pretty well able to service what the 10-year demographic studies say that they need to service. There are some slight decreases or decreasing areas within that map as well. And what I mean by slight decreases rather, is anywhere from 40 to 80 students, and that's generally 2 to 3 classrooms. So there is a slight decrease in some of the areas of the county. Sorry, let me go back there. You can see in white where those neutral areas are, but the darker that it gets, the more decreasing there are. And one of the areas we saw that there is a decrease of more than 80 students over the long term in that lower area at the bottom of the screen. That's where Windsor Hills, right below, I believe, River Oak, Eagles Nest. At the middle school level, the story's a little different, to be quite honest with you. You can see the little dots as far as where the middle schools are. Here, you see the neutral area, the Austin area, because you just did go through a building program, you do have the capacity in that way. So there, the enrollment, the demographic enrollment says that that's pretty well neutral over the coming 10 years. There is slight decrease in both the northern and southern part of the school district, and certainly there is increase in more of the 61 alternate 17 area. That's what we see as a middle school, from a middle school perspective. Now, this was before the school board made a decision to readjust lines there from a middle school standpoint. This really helped understand what that middle school was why that middle school line needed to shift around. You had to balance that whole middle school equation. You had to know where you were growing, where you were staying the same, and where you were slightly decreasing. So now, in a much better way, you're more balanced across the middle school area. Story continues with the high school levels. There's 3 high school zones there: Somerville, Fort Dorchester, and Ashley Ridge. You can see the Somerville area and the Ashley Ridge area in dark. That's really a higher than 80 student growth there, so several classrooms will be needed past what the capacity is at those schools right now. Fort Dorchester area is still growing, just not growing at as high of a rate, so between 40 and 80 students over that long-term look at the facility. I'll pause there for just a second. Anybody have any questions about mapping or numbers? We do look at, and this will become important later on, is we do look at matriculation. Obviously, elementary schools feed middle schools that feed high schools, so any big capital improvements plan that you have or any enrollment shifts in attendance lines do matter. So that's really what that next step is meant to be, not only from looking at it year over year, but how does it look over the 10 years to make sure that we have a good path forward in that way, not only at the elementary school, but the middle school and certainly the high school. I'm going to ask Michelle Smith to join me, and what we thought we would do this afternoon is use those 4 examples that we had at our last meeting and really dive into how you take that demographics, how you take that enrollment information, and that facility assessment information, and really start to make a definitive plan. The definitive plan is not a us. That definitive plan is a you guys, and we certainly understand that. But what we wanted to do this afternoon is really put you in a position to start to have the right pieces to make good decisions for capital improvements plans moving forward. Michelle.
Thanks, Ben. It's great to be here in front of you all again. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Oh, thank you. So the interesting thing about looking at all of your schools and reviewing them from a facility assessment standpoint is that they each begin to tell their own story. So when we start to pair that with this very, undeniable black and white demographic information, then we can start really understanding how the story needs to be told at every facility. So if we start with Somerville Elementary, just to remain high level, and we, spent an entire, half a day at most of these facilities. We walked all the corridors just to refresh your memory. We spoke with the administration. We reviewed a typical classroom at every grade level. We reviewed the specialized areas, cafeterias, gymnasiums, media centers, computer labs at every school, so we could get that visual baseline of every facility to put into this report. At Somerville, in considering the demographic information, growth is remaining stable. It's not growing, and we understand that the school is currently under capacity. So what this means for this particular school is that we can take a broader look at its needs. We understand that there is one building that comprises on the campus that may be one of the oldest school district buildings I think it was maybe the old high school, and then the campus grew and enlarged. And so, we may consider that to improve this school story, we may consider replacing that particular building portion in order to just bolster the campus and improve the presence of the school. But there are others, if you go on to the next slide, Ben, there are other site conditions and other security conditions that we observed through our observations as well. We are aware that there are portables sitting on the campus that, if they're no longer needed, they may be able to be moved, and playground or parking expanse could be taking its place. In talking to the principal, there's a concern about the playground presence and the proximity of the main entry of the school to the bus drop-off, so there may be an opportunity to reconfigure that traffic pattern to improve the safety and security of that particular school. And then there's a myriad of other smaller, minor things like, leaks with the canopy, and then, an ADA access that needs to be secured that are more minor, but that, are in our reports as well. So, those are, for Somerville Elementary, just an example of the broader conclusions that we can make, but then the smaller tasks that we can use to write a maintenance report for every facility. And if we go on to the next example, did I get everything there?
You did.
Okay. Okay. Yes. I believe it's the wing that connects. Well, that wing, but then there's another wing, I think, behind it that is
double-story building.
pretty old. Well, the double-story building, that is its span. Oh, yes.
Last couple renovations of raising the floor.
That's it. Yes. Yes. There's this floor. Yeah, there's a floor issue there. That's the building I'm talking about. But the cafeteria building is older too. Yes. It's kind of in the middle. It's between the cafeteria wing and the portables. That's the building I'm talking about. Sorry, I don't have a. Did I have a plan up here? I don't think I have a plan. We left him out. Did you have another question, Barbara? Or any other questions about that?
No, I was just wondering, I was trying to just figure out in my mind which was the old building, because I know that they're using the Rollins, or the old high school, as you said, lunchroom, and I just didn't know if that was the
Gotcha.
area you were talking about.
Well, the lunchroom that Somerville Elementary had, they're using for whatever, but that would make great art rooms or music rooms.
Yes.
To finish,
Yes.
since the others are located on that hall,
Right.
giving her more classroom space somewhere else. So there should not be a need, if the back wing is reworked and additional classrooms are put upstairs for the upper grades, 4th and 5th in particular, then the school could go back to having 700, 800 like the other elementary schools and
Right.
really service their attendance area real well. We would then take where the trailers are all at Rollins, we're moving all those out. That's enough room by back of the gym, back of the building, over by Somerville Elementary, the old Rollins cafeteria, which is the new cafeteria, fairly new. That area in there would be the playground. We would move it up on top of the hill, off of the bus loop, putting a bus loop in the back behind there, getting all the buses off of Main Street,
Right.
and enlarging the parking for Somerville Elementary, enlarge the parking for Span, and create parking for the new district office for principals meetings, board meetings, where we have a large number of visitors and staff. We cannot accommodate their parking. Is totally inadequate. And so, and also it'd be used for the football game. So, and now we're looking at a partnership with the town, possibly for other social events going on in and around our area. It really could be a highly enhanced value to Somerville in general. So it's long overdue. But that's the kind of projects we're talking about.
Right.
Would give us a lot more mileage, and say even a new school. With the growth we have, those are the places that would fill in the little extra gaps that we might see, or bumps down the road that would keep us from having to build another new school. And they're so expensive. A new elementary school with land and all would be a minimum of 25 million, probably 27, 28. I could do a lot. I could take and completely renovate Span and Somerville Elementary and give them extra classroom space, probably best program integrity for the ones they have for less money than that, and really take two schools and make them really super nice.
Right. I think that what we're seeing is, right, concluding in that manner. You know, if the trend is not for the elementary school level to grow increasingly, then there's no need to build a new school, and you can reallocate those funds to improve your existing, properties, continue the investment in those for long overdue items, like you're saying, Doctor. Absolutely. Okay, so Reeves, again, another elementary school example. In this particular example, Reeves shares a campus with DuBose. And so we are seeing that in that area, growth is pretty stable or declining. And so the objective at Reeves and both DuBose becomes to move instructional space out of those portables, which you pretty much have done successfully at most all your other schools. So the idea there is not to satisfy increasing numbers because the population isn't growing in that way, but just to clean up the campus, make it more secure. At Reeves and DuBose, go to the next slide, Ben, please. There are some site drainage issues as they relate to the portables. There are also some perimeter security issues, because the residential neighborhood likes to share the grounds for the schools, which is kind of the case at many of your schools. They use the fields for recreation on weekends and after school hours. But there may be the opportunity to just make the campus more secure at both the elementary and middle school level. And if we just go on to the next example, I think it's DuBose after this one, or do you want?
Let me add one
okay.
thing about
yeah,
this.
Please.
Is a good point about Reeves. This is why looking at demographics and assessment is really important. Is because we do see that you probably need some additional classrooms at Reeves. Not only just to take out the portables, but to improve that campus in that way. But what we also know about the assessment of that facility, there's a large swath of exterior wall that really needs to be corrected from a water infiltration standpoint. So those two items together start to really form a plan of action over the next several years. And that's where we're going. That's why we're showing these things, both demographically as far as that goes, but also assessment-wise as well.
Right. And if we go back just to that one slide, Ben, what we have done in this executive summary is assigned a score. Every building has a score in 5 building categories: site, building envelope, interiors, MEP, and health, safety, and security. And so what we've done is we've taken our reports, we've taken the reports from the REI roofing and building envelope consultant firm, and we have summarized those scores just so you could have a baseline comparison of facilities when you're comparing them against one another. And that'll help us, and that'll help us later when we are forming, again, when we're writing the stories of each of these schools and forming the priorities that each school truly needs. So SPAN, I'll talk a little bit about, just mention SPAN. SPAN is another school that shares the campus, as Dr. Pai was saying, with the Somerville Stadium, the district office, the future district office, and Somerville Elementary. And, the growth at SPAN, again, is similar to Somerville. It's staying stable or it's slightly declining, so it has capacity. There are only a couple of classrooms, I think, that are used in the portable, so it's less a question of that, and it's more a question at this particular school of accessibility. I found that it was the split level of that front building, and then the way the grade tapers to Berlin G. Myers Parkway makes it fairly difficult, to navigate through the campus. So if there was an opportunity, I know that it has been added on to, the Media Center edition is newer, but if there was an opportunity to replace a portion of classroom buildings, like there's that one 3 classroom building in the middle that has the T1 or wood siding, and if there was an opportunity to evaluate the positioning of some of those older buildings that have drainage issues, that have building envelope issues, and create an addition that would offer classroom space and maybe meet the needs of the accessibility, then that may be another, piece that's very specific to SPAN, but that helps solve, its issues. Again, these building envelope and roof scores you see, there are some, roof issues. With this particular picture of the interior, it reminds me of, along with safety and security, the technology upgrades that we have been talking about, and I know y'all have been talking about, adding camera surveillance across all your facilities. And, I think that one important thing that we need to think about, if you haven't already, is, many of these schools, we saw a lot of server equipment, that was not in ideal spaces, but when you start to add camera devices to those server racks, then you need more space, you need more access. Those need very specific heating and cooling requirements. So, that is just another priority, that we need to dovetail into the overall plan, that we produce together. Alston Middle School. So this was another example of a campus, of a middle-aged campus that has, I think, a wing that may be outgrown. I think it was originally designed, one of the wings was originally designed for an elementary school, but then over time, you've got to make you ask your schools to adapt. So, this may be another case where you consider overall what the school needs are, site and security-wise, and, think about if a building portion needs to be replaced in that particular regard. Did I miss anything there, then? Okay. And then, is this maybe our next to the last example? Again, I talked a little bit about DeBose mostly. Here, the one thing, it shares the campus with Reeves. I talked a little bit about safety and security. Once the portables are removed and you've done that with your reanalyzation of the attendance zones to put all the students back in the building and not in portables, so that certainly is an improvement for safety and security. There are other minor things that can be done around to serve this campus. The enclosed courtyard, the exterior courtyard that is used. The buildings. There may just be a security question with the use of that, because every door that leads into that interior courtyard during the school day more or less has to remain open, for the students to matriculate in and out. And, kudos to the administration for, as an operational level, being able to manage that. But, cameras may be able to help them. More secure gates and fences and hardware may be able to help that situation. So those are the kinds of questions that once we understand the growth and that, what is needed from an overall standpoint is really, homing in on what the immediate issues, the present issues are, that can help paint the whole picture for us.
Only thing I would add there is DeBose has a lot of portables outside of it currently. That redraw, redraw of attendance lines helps that out tremendously. So with the overall goal that those portables, you would hope, wouldn't be needed in the future. That's again, that balancing act that you guys have to go through every year to make that happen. But what the demographic study does, the attendance line zones do, is it really tells us what to focus on at DeBose specifically, and that's taking care of that existing roof. That's taking care of those safety and security issues. There's a portion of the building that you have to go outside and then come back inside the main campus and really improve fencing around there. That's really where you start to go with not only this school as an example, but we have to look at it in every single 26 times, every single situation, to really get an idea of what needs to be done, in the next couple of years, but really what needs to be done overall for the next several.
I was going to ask, if I may, I'm guessing that since Oak Brook Middle School is a prototype of DeBose, you probably saw very similar, I know just the fencing and stuff, so very similar changes to be made in both of those schools. I know DeBose is more crowded, I think we just recently resolved that issue at Oak Brook Middle, but I'm guessing Oak Brook Middle School is,
The scores are about the same. I think each one of them is slightly different in wear and tear, but I think you're right. The age of the building does make a difference there. So in that age of a building, you start to see very similar things start to happen. Roofing is always the first and foremost of that. In this case, site drainage is also a very big issue that has to be solved when you improve the campus overall. I'd say safety and security, although there is a plan of action there that the school district has taken, and then it's the individual school as far as how do you go through the safety and security aspect. Is the security vestibule actually secure? Are all the exterior doors new? Are the frames electrified? There's all kinds of pieces to that, and that's all buried in the report, but it does make a very big difference when you're talking about making a plan of action, not just for the short term, but for the long term as well. Did that answer your question? Yes, ma'am.
At DuBose, when you were talking about the courtyard, you talking about that part that has the drain where all that concrete, just
Yes, ma'am.
closing that in? Because I've always thought that when it rains, it's like a,
There are a couple of drainage issues in the courtyard, yes, and I wouldn't propose to like close it in, but, I think the gates can be improved that exit that specific courtyard.
That drainage issue there, though, it might mean that you rework that entire courtyard so that you do get you don't get one primary drain point, that you get 4 or 5 drain points so that you don't ever have the issue of flooding or buildup of water so that it seeps inside of the building. You don't want that to occur. And I think there's a way, an improvement way, an actual constructed way that you can improve that in that manner. So that's the kind of level of recommendations that we go to kind of next for schools like DuBose. Well, like all of them have a series of recommendations.
And if we end up doing that, we would also ask the question, like I remember at DuBose, there's an outdoor basketball court. I'm sorry, there's an outdoor basketball court in the courtyard. So the question is, okay, is the basketball court in the right place? Is there an opportunity to improve outdoor classroom use? Other things. So, once we start to ask those questions, then it becomes a little bit of a design. We layer the design aspect into it, because if we do this, if we go to the effort of tearing up all the existing, concrete and putting in new drain lines, what else can we benefit? So.
Can I ask that real quick? And I feel like I'm going off subject, but it's about this. We've always had a problem at Alston Middle School with flooding or right in the front of the school for decades. And you were talking about what you were just talking about. Is that on your radar too? Okay, because I know we just went over it. All right, thank you, because that's definitely been a complaint for many, many. And we've tried everything, haven't we?
Town has helped us.
Yeah.
Nothing has worked thus far.
Nothing.
Let me speak to that for just one moment.
Thank you.
So each one of these that you see, it's what, like 2 or 3 pages of information. Back behind each one of those schools is about that much information that we share with the school district. We certainly share with Tony and maintenance and facilities so that their plans have all the information, all those little technical pieces in there. Site drainage was certainly one of them, and that's nearly across the board on older schools for the school district. So that becomes part of that main working plan as well. I'd love to go through each
That will take
individual
2 days.
report, but it would take a very long time. But I want you to know that that's in there
Okay,
for every single school.
thanks.
Right, and just to move along with this last example of Fort Dorchester High School, again, Fort Dorchester High School is an example, if you can go to the next slide, please, Ben, where, we have seen there will be a slight increase in enrollment and school and capacity, the capacity it needs to satisfy. We understand that there are, a couple of portables on site that are used. So, the question here may be, well, does it warrant, does it warrant an addition? Does the growth warrant an addition? Or can the high school attendance zones be positioned to absorb it? So these are just questions that we would ask. But again, it has its own story. It has the campus of the high school and the football stadium. So, in our observations, we looked at all of it. There were some site drainage issues, just normal wear and tear, especially of some of the athletic support facilities that, are just aged and over time, start to show their wear and tear. If you go to the next slide, please, Ben. And then, again, there are some, building envelope and roofing issues here that we would want to address in order to maintain, your asset here at this building. So, anything else? Okay.
So those are 5 examples, and like I said, there's 26 facilities, either in whole or part, with athletics being in addition to that too, that we've taken a look at. And I know that we're talking about demographics at each of these samples. We're talking about facility, the physical condition at each one of these facilities as well. The next steps for us are really giving you all available options, right? So you're going to get this in August. You're going to get this huge list of available, what we would perceive as maybe the priority, which is to maintain the building. But also, what are those long-term options available to you to either improve, correct, or prepare for growth or any revision to the way that you operate currently today. So that's where we're going. That's where we're leading to next. I would say, though, by the 27th of July, that's really our next step. You're going to be receiving the entire document from us in leading up to that August the 10th meeting. And that's an important meeting, but it's also a lot of data. We're trying to break it down as much as we can, but it's just a lot of information to share. So before I move on to kind of the goal setting side of this, are there any other additional questions as far as facility demographics or our conditions? All right. So, one of the things when you do look at long-range planning, we often go back to what the district's vision is for the future, because I think that's the most important piece of this. I know directly you've been involved in high growth over those past 20 years. However, knowing what's coming, knowing that growth is maybe not as high as it has been in the past, allows you to look at your facility plans moving forward in a different way, not in a better way, but in a different way. So that's really where we start from a vision standpoint. What does the district want to see out of its facilities overall over that next 5 years, over that next 10 years? So we often try to take your mission and your vision and apply that directly to facility assessment and capital improvements planning. So one of the things that we start with is we know your motto about leading the way, every student, every day, and that's an important fact. Focus on that individual student and how best can that facility serve that individual student. And you've had success there. And when we're looking at a 10-year facility plan, we do want it to be both sustainable and predictable. That makes a big difference, especially with the maintenance of these facilities, especially with the size of the assets that the district currently operates as well. We also know not only do you want your students to be world-class, you do want your facilities to complement those students and be world-class as well. So taking that vision all into effect, what are some of the draft goals that you would look for in that 10-year plan? I've got 8, and I'll share those with you this afternoon. They aren't the only ones, and I really would like input if anybody has additional input there to make those actual goals that the capital improvements plan would go after. And it's important because those goals will judge what the capital improvements plan will be at the end of the day. The first one is continue maintaining all existing facilities. It seems very straightforward, but really focus in on maintaining your existing facilities in a big way, to make sure that there is no deferred maintenance, to make sure that portables are not falling down or anything, anything like that. Make sure that the facility is maintained. And I think we've got a really good, strong starting point with that physical condition side of this assessment. The second one would be, it may be a goal of the district, and I think it's an honorable goal, is remove all temporary classrooms, remove all portables from your campus, especially when it goes into academics. If you can make that as one of the primary goals, that might be something that we can move forward with in a big way. Where there are needs as far as academic classrooms go, add those academic classrooms back in a permanent way, not a temporary way. The third one is, in keeping with continuing maintenance of your facilities, where there are opportunities to renovate or replace facilities in whole or in part because of their age or functional obsolescence, that should be a primary goal of capital improvements planning, not only overall, but here specifically in Dorchester School District 2. Many of your campuses have grown. A lot of them have different types of additions in different decades. And some of those additions may have outlived their life, are coming at the end of their life, where you might look to renew a campus by doing some additions and certainly some significant renovations overall. I would say on that one, the district has done a really good job of having brand new elementary, middle, and high schools in the relative past. So you do have a good baseline and a good way to kind of judge what those existing facilities should be, what the expectations of their quality should be overall at the end. Again, construct new additions or new schools to alleviate growth in some of the areas of the district. What I mean by that is look at that demographic study. Make sure that where you're building is in the right place. Make sure that it's not just a new school for new school sakes. It has a reason why it's there. Make additions that are based on the data. Make additions where it's necessary to make additions overall, to make sure that every dollar spent is in the right bucket. Again, technology, safety, and security enhancements. The district has either done an exceptional job there or has a plan, a current plan going on right there. Cameras is a good example of safety and security measures that are both being actively pursued by the district and installed by the school district as well. As Michelle mentioned, with all kinds of devices like cameras and many other things, technology infrastructure does make a difference. That's just in normal condition. That's not COVID, but it's even more important when it comes to that kind of world as well. So providing safety, security enhancements, technology enhancements to existing facilities and any new improvements should be, in my thought process, should be one of those primary goals that you really take a look at in the capital improvements plan. Sixth one is improve and enhance campuses for outdoor learning, recreation, and traffic patterns. Traffic has been, and I know is and has been an issue in this region over the last 20 years because of that growth. So really taking a look at your campuses and making sure that they operate optimally for separating bus and car traffic, for instance, or providing enough parking for staff and students during the day and during after hours. And I think there are several examples that in some of the mid-age facilities as well as some of the older facilities where those can occur. Well, one example might be that Somerville Elementary School and that whole campus in and around there, how you can start to look at where you place additions to replace buildings, but how you also improve the traffic flow in that area to make that operationally better and get those cars off of the main drive in and around there. Several examples of that. Next to last one is upgrade student learning environments to bolster program integrity for all facilities. As Dr. Pye said, you've been trying to catch up with enrollment because growth. Now is a chance to really look at the quality of those offerings, look at anything additional that you'd like to offer, like additional CTE programs or additional arts programs or STEM infusion in those classrooms. Those don't have to be new additions. Those can be conversions of existing campuses to serve new purposes. So that might be one area that we kind of focus in on as we look forward. And last but not least, use your partnerships. You have a lot of them right now. You have not only a Trident Technical partnership, you've got a City of North Charleston partnership, amongst other partnerships in the area. Use those partnerships to both expand your offerings and commingle your offerings where it's practical. So I think to me, those goals are pretty straightforward, but they are very specific to Dorchester School District 2 overall, at least as I started to begin to think about it. Now, it may be wrong. You might just say, get rid of them. But I would love to hear input on at least the goal side as we start to look at what that capital improvements plan might be in the future.
Yeah, I'll go. Ben, thank you. And I think where I want to go with that, this is, I think, a fantastic starting point. Looking at the words world-class, the world is different. The world is, and not just outside of today's circumstances, but just in general, I think it's very different. I think business is different. I think technology is different. The way kids learn is different. Everything is different, and it's changing every single day. What we learned when I was in school long ago, not that long ago, but and the way it's done is very different. So I think maybe it fits under number 7, but is it useful to potentially even go further into that as far as a design aspect, just to have the mindset? I think of stuff like modularity and being able to adapt and change for the future, because the CTE course today could be very different than a CTE course tomorrow.
Sure.
So I think, again, from my personal standpoint, do we put that in here? I think that's a goal probably of us in general, but how do we kind of really define that, I guess?
To me, I think we ought to really flesh that out there and make it more specific, more than just program integrity, because you're right. The way that students are taught today is very different than the way that students were taught even when I went through school. So there's a couple examples there. I know Michelle also was on the Leadership Dorchester side, and she was in Somerville Elementary School, and that group took a classroom there and changed it into a STEM lab, for instance. So that's a very simple example of how you can take an existing space and change it into something else. But I think where you're going, and tell me if I'm wrong here, I think where you're going is more collaboration, more soft skills, more about project-based learning, and how the building can really inform how, and it should, the two go together, the curriculum and the building go together, is that yes, design can solve those kind of efforts as well, so long as that's the goal in which you set forward in your schools. Elementary schools are pretty easy to understand from a space standpoint, where that train of thought really comes into fruition in a full way is high schools, but middle schools do have those components as well. Is that kind of where you were going with
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just an example, you think about libraries. Mm-hmm. I think about the future of libraries. When I did my MBA, there were literally 0 books in the library on a college campus. Right. Because it's all downloaded, it's all online now. So same thing. So now all of our kids are going to have devices. So things like lockers, are they needed? Are they not needed? So again, I just think the future of education is going to be very different. Mm-hmm. And so how you build for that, I think, needs to be part and parcel and really important in how we go forward for this stuff. Because again, I think it's going to be very, very different moving forward.
I agree. I just wanted to interject in here too, Justin. I hear what Mr. Farnsworth. I hear you I hear what you're talking about, and I think one thing we did not actually address in this, I'm sorry, I keep walking away from the microphone.
We're all trying to get you.
I know. is furniture. And thinking about FF&E improvements at schools. When I think of soft skills and, different curriculum in schools that will enforce that, I think about the opportunities that students have in between classes, outside of classes, interacting with each other. And that makes me think of additional student common spaces that we now are seeing in 21st century learning environments. And a lot of that has to do with soft seating. And, that I think can make a real difference in the environment of a lot of these schools. And even if it's just not only to just provide some new furniture, it really helps, I think, students, especially younger students, take more pride in their school and in their building. So that, may be another strong consideration that we should, layer into our priority list, which facilities could use and upgrade media center furniture. It doesn't even necessarily have to be school-wide, but it could be, a media center furniture renovation.
Flexibility is what keeps coming to my mind, but we need to define what that means, and I think we can work towards that. Anyone else? Goals?
So you'll be coming back. You will be coming back before the board in August 10th.
Yes.
To do this other piece, and that will wrap it up. Because right after that, I would like the board, especially through the facilities committee, to meet, and hopefully you'll get all the finished copies of everything they've come up with in the recommendation sheet. And at that meeting, we can maybe have a workshop or set another workshop after that to begin to prioritize our safety situations, our roof and air conditioner replacements, things that we don't have a choice over. As we look at other things we would really desire, then we have to begin to think about how do we get funding for those things, since we're so limited. So we know because we're not going to have enough to do the things that are required, let alone the things we'd like to have that we need to be world class. We've never been able to do that. We're closer than ever, but just the well is dry. So I think it would help the board to understand, as those of you running for re-election want to continue on, could begin to set district goals with me about how, or whomever, how that can be done, and some timeline that we can kind of force ourselves to make that a top issue. We've never been this close, and I never dreamed in my lifetime I would see us this close. But we've moved further away on the conditions of the schools, but I'm just looking here. We have, in my 21 years, we have done 26 building projects. We have built 10 new schools. We have completely remodeled GAP. We're building a new district office. We built this new center here for adult ed, special services, and transportation. We have additions. We've added on twice to Ashley Ridge, twice to Fort Dorchester, 3 times to Somerville High School, once to Oak Brook Middle, once to Oak Brook Elementary, once to Eagle Nest, once to Alston, once to Knightsville, and once to Somerville Elementary. So that's 13 additions over 9 schools. So you add that up, we've done 26 building projects at 22 of our 26 sites. That's pretty doggone good. So we've done a good job. It's just the distance was so far. You have closed the gap, but as time moves on, the deterioration of the buildings are still there. Thank goodness the growth is slowing to the point that maybe then our focus can be on getting our buildings up to speed. The shifts that we did recently in the attendance areas, I think, were profound. They seemed to be small, and people thought, well, why are you bothering? So we won't have to keep worrying about it year in and year out. When we go to get the middle school done, I think we can resolve the middle school issue for some time. Maybe a wing somewhere might complement the school to get us where we need to be. We've added seats to Rollins. We continue to add spots there. The problem there is we have to add teachers when we have the spots, and there, because of the arts program, you have to add an arts teacher as well as the academic ones for the regular classes. So it could be 3 or 4 teacher swing just to put 75 kids there. So it is quite expensive, but we want to max out every space that we have. So I do see all portables. That's very, very attainable. We have cut them 65% at least, and we really have probably about 20 on our campuses, maybe more, that need to go yesterday. So we're trying to find a home for them. That leaves us using only the ones that DeBose next year. We'll probably have to still use about 8 of them at DeBose. We'll be using 6 of them at Reeves. That's 14. I'm looking around the districts. I think Givehans has about 8 we're using there. That's 22. Other than those parenting things, which we don't have to have. I'm trying to think, is there any other school with mobile units that we're using? Fort Chester may end up having to use 1 or 2. We're down around 30, certainly no more than 35, and we once had 250, maybe or more. We have really come a long way, and we're real close now. So the new middle school will do away with those at DeBose. Should be no portables at any of the schools at middle school. So that'll be the first time. We don't need them at the high school. The few that we have are because we had them, and we just let them stay, and we use them for things like early college and some of our special programs, but we could have room. Every teacher at Somerville High School has a teaching space, and I've been in this district for 47 years, and the last 2 years are the first years that school has ever didn't have at least 30 to 50 or 75 teachers roving, and we have none roving. Everybody has their own personal classroom. We've come a long way. So,
Right. So next steps. I did want to give Jenny a chance to talk a little bit about process, because we are preparing right now for that August the 10th board workshop again, to talk a little bit about maybe how that's coming together, just in preparation for you guys for next time.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. All right, again, I'm Jenny Kirk. I'm with Thompson Turner Construction. I'm joined by Hal Turner, also with Thompson Turner. And I just thought I'd talk a little bit about our role in this process of putting this facility study together, just so you kind of understand our purpose here and how it helps you in your future decision making. So my department for pre-construction at Thompson Turner, the purpose is to really get involved very early with our owners and the design teams for the owners in helping to predict what costs are going to be for a project, be it something as small as replacing countertops in a group toilet or as large as building a $50 million facility. So we get involved very early when it's just conceptual in terms of you defining what your program and your needs are, and as early as a schematic design that the architect gives us, and we start talking about what is that going to cost based on the data that we have in-house. And the reason that's important for a project such as a facility assessment, or very large facility assessment such as your own, is that we are able to utilize real data that has come from actual projects very recently. I've been involved in a number, and my department has been involved in a number of these facility studies. And what we have found, particularly for this stage of the assessment, that is very valuable is all of our data for all of the capital improvement programs that we're working on across the state. We have several clients who come to us and really want us to help them during the summers to knock out a large chunk of their needs, be it replacement of roofs or HVAC systems or ceiling tiles, entire grids, and really kind of getting a large chunk of that work done while your students, your children, are at home for the summer. So the methodology that we're using with this, Ben referenced that, these executive summaries that Michelle showed you today, you're seeing 3 and 4 pages per school. We're getting 300 and 400 pages per school of detailed information from these guys that we're using. And one of our senior pre-construction managers, she's actually a registered architect, so I'm pretty thrilled to have her working on this. She's digging into the details of every single line item for every single school. And it was also mentioned that there was a ranking system. So what we're really trying to focus on for you to help you prioritize your work and the decisions that you're going to make over the next 0 to 3 years, as you see here, is what are your priorities? So we're focusing on those schools, not the new facilities, which are 5, or the very good facilities, which are 4, but we're really focusing on the 3s, the 2s, and the 1s, which are ranging from fair all the way down to critical, because we really want you to be able to say, okay, this is what I want to prioritize. But you don't really know what you can prioritize until you know what is it going to cost. You got it. Thank you. So we are trying to really evaluate that so that we can give you those numbers and that they are real numbers based on real data. And so she is putting together all of this information in a spreadsheet. Of course, for your purposes, it'll be rolled up into one line item for each school. But if you want us to dig down into it with you or with your facility staff to really understand what is behind these numbers, we can actually get into those details with you as well. She is actually assessing it in terms of a 0 to 5 year prioritization, so that if it is a critical need, she's flagging that as if you want to go back and look, okay, we need to prioritize these dollars in year 1 versus this may not be as important because this playground equipment is being replaced in 5 years. We'll put that at year 5. So we're taking all of that data, and when we come back on August the 10th, we hope to be able to give you all of that information. It will be ultimately in your reports. And the reason that this is ultimately going to be very important is really not only being able to help your maintenance team determine how much you're going to spend on these facilities for capital improvements immediate over summers or even weekends or holidays, but how are you going to decide what facilities you do want to replace or where you want to make additions? And so you're going to be able to look at our assessment in terms of how many dollars you need to look at maybe a critical or fair rated facility. Is it worth it to put those dollars in a renovation, or do you want to replace it? And that's how you'll be able to, assess that later. And then furthermore, we are always involved at the next stages where if you want to compare and contrast additions and renovations versus new construction facilities, we will sit and work with you on all different options to figure out how you want to spend your dollars on new construction or renovation. So I don't know if Hal wants to add anything. I'm thinking he probably will, but if you have any questions, I can answer those as well.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo what Jenny said. Really, I commend you on having this study going on now, because what it does is it sets you up for success. There's a lot of detail and effort that's gone into what Michelle and Ben have done, and then our staff, and just not going to broad brush and square foot things. We're going to deep dive. Stephanie's been working on this, and it is a ton of information. And what you'll see is some of these smaller things, if you don't really pay attention to them when you go to do them, they'll bite you because you didn't think them all the way through. So our staff will go through, think everything through, and I think it reiterate what Mr. Pye was saying is set you up from playing defense to playing offense. And, we'll provide the information, and then one of the other tough sells for you to think about is how you put cost indices on things, because we're going to predict them in today's dollars, but if you prioritize them over a 5 or 10-year period, then you're going to need to build indices into those so that when you do go to do them, you're not surprised at that point. And we're going to also do our best to predicting where we are with the market. You hit on a little bit. We're learning something every day. Right now is a great time to pave. Asphalt and indices are really low. But, if you need windows or doors or mechanical equipment, some of those plants have been down for a couple of months. So all of a sudden, those guys are getting real proud of that stuff. But we're seeing a lot of changes, a lot of things going on, but our staff's involved with, putting together 2 or 3 estimates a month. So we have a good pulse on what's going on in there, as well as also with the office of school facilities. There's things going on with COVID, and I'm sure there's going to be some spacing requirements and other things that all come into play, as a result of all the things we're going through. So we're going to look at all of these things with MPS and do our best to predict where you'll be and provide you the information you need to make decisions, an educated decision. And so we look forward to seeing you in August.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hal. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Michelle. That's August, right? Sounds like, we're kind of culminating on a lot of things that have been going on in the background for several months. Oh, sure.
Nurse is keeping you clean.
That's right. She's doing a good job. Once we have that meeting and get a good picture of what's next, what those priorities are, obviously moving into final executive summaries, presentations would be next, so that you have a good baseline to present to any number of people, whether that be parents, whether that be municipalities, whomever, so that we have that document ready for you and presentable. And then looking at that long-term, whatever that long-term committee is, to really, take that to the next level from a capital improvements stand. Any additional questions? I really thank you for your time this afternoon. It's been a pleasure going through every single facility. Believe it or not, it sounds like we look for all the bad things. We don't. We saw a lot of good things too. So I really appreciate not only your time this afternoon, but your leadership's and certainly your school staff's availability as far as that goes. And it really has made a difference as far as uncovering the things that need to be uncovered to make a really good plan for you moving forward into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. And if it's okay, if anybody should have questions between now and when we meet again, we feel free to contact you.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you much.
Okay, we will adjourn our workshop and meet back at 6 o'clock for our regular board meeting.